You're standing at a seafood counter. Ice glitters under the lights, and the air smells like salt and metal. Two bins sit side by side, lobsters in one, crawfish in the other. Same hard shell, same claws, same silhouette, so your brain files them into one idea. The same creature, just different sizes. Then, a tiny detail breaks that shortcut. The lobster is lifted carefully, weighed alone, priced like a decision. The crawfish is scooped by the pound, piled into a bag, priced like a plan for a crowd. That contrast isn't random, it's a clue. So what are you actually buying? Two versions of the same animal, or two completely different food stories? And why does one taste like butter and the other taste like the pot? In the next few minutes, you'll never mix them up again. Let's get into it right here on Secrets of Simple Things. Same armor, different animal. At a glance, both animals hit the same visual notes: a hard shell, a long segmented body, jointed legs, and those iconic front claws. They're both crustaceans, and nature repeats good designs. That shared silhouette is exactly why menus and markets keep tricking us into thinking they're interchangeable. Lobsters and crawfish, also called crayfish, and sometimes crawdads in the US, are different clawed crustaceans adapted to different habitats. A lobster is built like a slow, dense machine, thick, weighty, designed to handle cold ocean pressure and rocky seafloors. Crawfish are built for shallow freshwater worlds, lighter, quicker, better at slipping into mud and weeds than holding ground in open water. If you've ever heard someone say, "They're basically the same," that's the brain doing what it always does, compressing details into one label. But the moment you separate the labels, the rest becomes easier. Same outline, different purpose. And purpose shapes everything that matters to us: texture, flavor, price, and the way we eat them. Two worlds, two food stories. To understand why lobster feels luxury and crawfish feels festival, picture their homes. Lobsters live in saltwater, often in colder oceans, crawling along rocky bottoms and tucking into crevices. Getting them from that world to your plate takes effort. Trapping, hauling, sorting, handling, keeping them fresh. Even if you never see that work, you can feel it in the way lobster is sold, carefully, individually, like something that deserves its own spotlight. That effort quietly became part of the meaning. Lobster doesn't arrive as background. It arrives as the center of the table, the thing you order when you want dinner to feel like an occasion. Birthdays, anniversaries, we should celebrate nights. The taste matters, of course, but so does the story we attach to it. Deep water, cold air, a creature that doesn't come easy. Crawfish live in freshwater, rivers, ponds, swamps, rice fields, places where seasons show up loudly and life happens close to the surface. In parts of the southern United States, especially Louisiana, crawfish are less a dish and more a season. They show up in big bags, in big pots, in loud backyard gatherings. The point isn't one perfect bite. The point is the boil, the spice, the steam, the newspapers spread across a table, the way everyone leans in at once. You don't order crawfish the same way you order lobster. You gather for it. You make room. You plan for the mess. Their worlds write their food stories. One becomes a special bite. The other becomes a shared ritual. Size and claws. The first clue. If you want the simplest visual cue, start with the claws. A lobster's claws look built to crush, thick, bulky, almost tool-like. Crawfish claws are slimmer and lighter, more about quick grabbing than brute force. Size follows the same logic. Lobsters commonly weigh pounds. Crawfish fit in your palm. That difference isn't just more food. It predicts the whole experience. Lobster is designed for big bites, crawfish for many small ones. There's also a psychological difference hiding in that scale. With lobster, you feel like you're receiving a single defined portion. One animal, one main event. With crawfish, you feel like you're entering a pile, a process, a rhythm. It's less serve me and more let's do this. Habitat: saltwater versus freshwater. Water is the invisible ingredient in seafood, and it shapes texture. Lobster meat is famously substantial, firm, structured, almost architectural. When you pull tail or claw meat free, it holds together like it has a plan, then breaks in clean, satisfying chunks. Crawfish meat is smaller and more delicate. It doesn't dominate your palate. It leaves space. That space is why crawfish pairs so naturally with strong seasoning. Freshwater life tends to create an ingredient that behaves like a carrier. It takes on what you add to it. Different water creates different life, and different life creates different mouthfeel. Flavor: butter versus spice. Notice what lobster is traditionally served with: melted butter. Not a complicated sauce, not a mask, just butter. That pairing tells you lobster's secret. Lobster has its own sweetness and richness, and butter simply turns the volume up. It enhances rather than replaces. Crawfish usually arrives the opposite way, in a boil, drenched in spice and aroma, tangled with corn and potatoes, stained red by seasoning. Crawfish is milder by nature, and that mildness is its superpower. It absorbs flavor like a sponge. With lobster, you taste the animal. With crawfish, you taste the pot, the blend, the technique, the family preference that says, more garlic, or more heat, or don't forget the lemon. That's why people describe lobster as buttery, even before the butter, and crawfish as spicy, even though the spice isn't the animal. It's the tradition wrapped around it. Yield: big bites versus many peels. Here's the difference your hands will remember. Lobster gives payoff: tail meat, claw meat, and enough substance that one animal can feel like a meal. You crack, you pull, you get a real bite, dense enough that you can stop and actually taste it before the next one. Crawfish makes you work for each bite. The edible meat is mostly in the tail, and you peel dozens to get a few mouthfuls. That sounds like a downside, until you see what it really is. Crawfish isn't a quantity food, it's an activity food. The peeling becomes a social metronome. Talk, laugh, peel, repeat. The growing pile of shells is evidence you were there long enough for the meal to turn into a memory. And then there's the little detail that gives crawfish its cult following: the seasoned juices. Even people who don't say it out loud know the truth. Crawfish is as much about flavor delivery as it is about meat. Price, labor, conditions, and scarcity. Look at how they're sold and the price makes sense. Lobster is priced like a main character, per animal, per pound, per special choice. It's tied to deeper, colder waters and requires more care and labor to harvest and handle. Those realities become the price tag. Crawfish is sold in bulk, by the bag, by the pound, because it's abundant and often harvested or farmed at scale. The cost reflects a different kind of supply chain. Price isn't only flavor, it's effort, logistics, and the kind of environment the animal comes from. Culture: elegance versus community. Culture puts the final stamp on the difference. Lobster tends to live in candlelit rooms and milestone dinners, where the plate is quiet and the point is to notice each bite. Crawfish tends to live outside, on folding tables, in loud gatherings where everyone eats with their hands and nobody apologizes for the mess. One is elegance. The other is community. Neither is higher. They're simply different answers to different needs. Sometimes you want a meal to feel precise. Sometimes you want it to feel alive. The real mistake is the question. The biggest myth is the easiest one. Crawfish are baby lobsters. They look like it, so our brains accept it. But they're not the same animal at different ages. They're different creatures shaped by different water, and that difference echoes through everything else. Another myth is that they taste the same, just scaled down. Taste isn't only species, it's texture, baseline flavor, and what the food is culturally built to do. Lobster is meant to stand on its own, which is why it can be paired with something as simple as butter and still feel complete. Crawfish is meant to carry seasoning and become part of a bigger event, which is why the boil matters as much as the animal. And then there's the endless argument. Which one is better? Better for what? Better for big, rich bites and a plate-centered meal? Lobster. Better for a spicy, hands-on night that feeds a crowd and turns dinner into a memory? Crawfish. The debate exists because people use the same word, better, to mean different goals. Change the goal, and the argument disappears. The 5-second rule. Standing at the counter, you don't need a lecture. You need a decision. First layer, identity. Ocean creature with heavy claws, priced per animal? Lobster. Freshwater creature, handful-sized, sold in bags? Crawfish. Second layer, purpose. If you're paying for bites, big pieces, rich flavor, a meal that feels special, choose lobster. If you're paying for the table, spice, hands-on peeling, laughter, and a shared ritual, choose crawfish. One memory line will carry you. Lobster is dinner. Crawfish is an event. Two animals, two kinds of hunger. Lobster and crawfish look like distant twins because nature repeats shapes that work. But they were built for different lives. One for cold saltwater depth, one for shallow freshwater change. And because they live different lives, they feed different parts of us. Lobster feeds the part of us that wants a moment to feel special, rich, deliberate, satisfying in a way you can count in bites. Crawfish feeds the part of us that wants to belong, bold, messy, communal, satisfying in a way that's measured less by meat and more by time around the table. Maybe that's the quiet lesson hiding in the seafood aisle. The most useful truth isn't only what something is, it's what it's for. Do you love lobster for that perfect, satisfying bite? Or crawfish for the bold, irresistible flavor? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy uncovering the hidden stories behind everyday foods, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next small secret.